So we have some new concerning polling data that came out about the health of the country. Let me show everybody here. So this is from NBC News. Can the nation come together? In 2010, 45% said no, 50% said yes. In January 2022, 70% said no, 27% said yes. That's amazing. At the bottom of the screen there, do you believe American democracy is threatened? 76% say yes. 76%. See, when I read this poll, it makes me sad. And the reason it makes me sad is that I feel like people have succumbed to an illusion. And look, you see it in your own personal life, right? If you have holiday events at your house or at a family member's house and you go there and it's Thanksgiving and you got your right-wing uncle who's annoying as fuck and you got, the uber lefty cousin that you have, and in some ways it feels like, hey, a lot of these problems are irreconcilable and there's just totally different worldviews and stuff. And you feel like, damn, how do we overcome this? How do we govern a country that has just a lot of variation in the building blocks of your basic worldview, even from just the premises of what you think is important? There's massive disagreement. But as I've told you guys all along, a lot of the disagreement is just an illusion. It's just an illusion because we're all getting screwed by the same people and by the same system. Whether you're some hardcore Trumper in the middle of the country who scrapes together like $27K a year doing odd jobs to help people with construction shit around your town, or you're some kid graduating into a devastatingly terrible economy where you can't get a job and you're stuck in your parents' basement. The problems are the same. The source of the problem is the same, and the solutions are the same. And unfortunately, look, I hate to jump on the bandwagon of the social media bashing, but I do think they are responsible for some of the problem here, whether it's Facebook or Twitter, or mainstream media, of course. These are outlets that have massively ramped up negative partisanship. These are outlets that hyper-focus on culture war stuff that makes people believe we can't find any sort of common ground with the people who disagree with us. And I just think that's wrong. I just think that's a total illusion. I think that stuff is pervasive, particularly because it distracts from the fact that we're all in the same boat, and that boat is slowly but surely sinking. And so when you look at these numbers, 70% says the nation can't come together. I don't even know what that means. What does that mean, the nation can't come together? If we have a government that actually gets in there and starts representing our interests, I do think people will come together. I absolutely do. I think if you have the basic needs of the American people are met, and you don't have this sense of scarcity where it's a zero-sum game, then I do think people will come together. There tends to be fewer scapegoats when people feel like they don't need a scapegoat. If there's a chicken in every pot and everybody's doing relatively okay, people will have a more harmonious attitude and would be willing to unite more. And we're always going to have our disagreements on certain things. There's always going to be a divide in this country when it comes to social issues and culture war stuff. But it's absolutely possible to massively turn down the volume on that stuff to make the disagreements more manageable and less severe. And when you look back at May 2010, I mean, we're talking like Tea Party time, and still 50% of the country thought, of course we could come together. Now that number's down to 27%. 70% say we can't come together. That's what they want you to believe. They want you to believe that we can't come together. They want you to believe that it's impossible. They want you to believe that your fellow American is the enemy. But your fellow American is not the enemy. Your fellow American is a fellow victim. And we know what the problem is. The problem is that corporate money and billionaire money has flooded the government, and the government now represents solely the interests of corporations and billionaires. And that's devastating. Add in the defense contractor money, military-industrial complex money, and there's your endless war. And so instead of keeping our eye on the ball and knowing who the enemy is, we've all turned on each other. It's fine to disagree, but not want to slit each other's throats. And I think people have lost sight of that in many respects. But we need to be reminded of that fact. And even the idea, do you believe American democracy is threatened? 76% say yes. Now, I'm sure people interpreted that differently, like the question differently. Do you believe American democracy is threatened? Maybe some people on the right interpreted that as like, you know, some foreign outsider threat is going to undermine us or something. I don't know. But when I read that, I mean, my answer is like, we don't even have a functional democracy anymore. So of course it's threatened. It's been threatened and in many clear ways defeated. It's been replaced with an oligarchy and a kleptocracy. So on that front, I mean, maybe that one's not as concerning to me as the can the nation come together one. But we got to break out of this pessimism, man. We got to break out of it. And it's just gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And we're seeing the fruits of that now. I mean, people who are hardcore Trump-based supporters who are still in his camp and versus people, resistance liberals who may still love Biden. I mean, that's different planets that they seem to be on. But understand, those groups are relatively small compared to the general population. And there was a poll the other day that we discussed where, what was it? It was only like about 25% or 25 or 29%, somewhere in that range, are the people who identify as Democrats or Republicans and part of the party. But then you had over 40%, like the bulk of the country was independent. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have political views, like some lean right, some lean left. It's actually about a 50-50 split within that 40-some-odd%. But that tells you there are more non-Kool-Aid drunk partisan losers in the country than anybody really thinks or acknowledges. And so we got to break free from this, man. The title, Downhill and Divisive, Americans Sour on Nation's Direction and NBC News poll. Well, it's perfectly reasonable to sour on our direction because our direction has been wrong for decades. Ever since Ronald Reagan and the turn towards deregulation and tax cuts for the rich and the era of big government being over, it's been brutal for everybody. The New Deal era was shivved, was stabbed in the back, and the knife was twisted. And that was the only thing that was holding together the fabric of a nation, in a sense. Mutual social safety net programs that were there for the benefit of everybody. And then when those were obliterated, we slowly but surely got worse and worse and worse in terms of hyperpartisanship and in terms of negative feelings towards each other. I am optimistic that we can turn it around, but I think it will take a lot of work, and I think it will take structural change in this country. Because the conditions are so brutal that it becomes a dog-eat-dog world with brutal conditions. I think that's almost an inescapable reality, not just of Americans, but of any country that has vicious and brutal conditions that are oppressive against the people. So, not good poll numbers, but it could be worse, and we're going to work on making it better. And you know, it's almost amazing it's not higher, given just how much everybody feels screwed right now. I mean, look at the pandemic that we have going on the brink of World War III over Ukraine, on the brink of the market's tanking today. We're on the brink of a super bubble bursting, which would be worse than 2008. And it's almost amazing that the numbers aren't higher, but a lot of work to do to get it back in the other direction. Step number one is making everybody believe it's even possible to go back in the other direction, which I definitely think it is, even though it's hard. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.